A millionaire hired a humble woman to be a nanny for his young daughters. One day, the millionaire came home early and heard something that shocked him. He was known for his fortune and his talent in business, but despite all the success, there was something that money couldn't buy: his late wife's company. Now, as a widower, he raised his two young daughters alone and felt the pressure of reconciling work and family, despite living in an imposing mansion and having everything that anyone could want. Hector needed help. He couldn't be there for everything, and he knew that finding someone he could trust to take care of his daughters was essential. But who could imagine that the person he would hire for that role would change his life forever? Hector had always been a determined man, focused on his career and achieving business success. From a young age, he knew what he wanted and worked tirelessly to build his empire. Despite all his success, he never stopped being a loving father to his two young daughters, who were his greatest treasure. However, his life changed drastically on a tragic day. He, his wife, and his daughters were returning from a family trip when they suffered a serious car accident. That day was forever marked in Hector's memory. He and the girls survived with minor injuries, but his wife was not so lucky. The woman he loved so much died on the spot, leaving a deep void in their lives. Since then, Hector has carried the pain of loss, affected by the fact that despite all his wealth, there was nothing he could do to bring his wife back. He gave everything for his daughters, but he knew that no matter how hard he tried, there was something that could not replace the love and presence of their mother. The pain of losing their mother also deeply affected his daughters, who were still too young to fully understand, but they felt her irreplaceable absence. Every day, weeks after the death of his wife, Hector still lived in deep mourning. Every corner of the mansion reminded him of the life he had lost, and the pain of seeing his daughters suffer left him even more distressed. He loved them more than anything, but he began to realize that no matter how hard he tried to be the present father they needed, the weight of taking care of his company, one of the most renowned in the country, dragged him back to reality. He knew that the company, inherited from his father 10 years ago, was the family's livelihood. Since assuming leadership, the business has grown exponentially, and thousands of employees depended on his management. Taking care of his daughters and the company at the same time seemed impossible. He needed help, but he couldn't trust his daughters to just anyone. They were his only family now, and Hector cared for their safety and well-being above all else. With this in mind, he decided to advertise a job offer for a nanny online. Days passed, and soon he saw more than 20 interested candidates. However, Hector knew that among all of them, he had to find someone he could count on, someone he could trust who had not only the ability but the heart to take care of his girls. The next morning, he began interviewing candidate after candidate. Nothing seemed to impress him. Some had impressive qualifications, but something was missing that he couldn't describe in words. Maybe it was kindness, humility, or even the simple fact that taking care of children required more than an impeccable resume. It was then that Lorena walked in. She was a 30-year-old woman with a calm countenance and a humble presence. Her smile was soft and gentle, and her eyes conveyed patience and sincerity. Hector, who had started the interview already tired of listening to mechanical answers, felt a different connection with her from the beginning. After the initial presentation, Hector observed her. Then Lorena began, trying to maintain a professional tone but noticing something genuine in her. "It seems that you are a very patient and understanding person. What is your experience with children?" Lorena smiled shyly before answering. "I have worked in several homes taking care of children, mainly for families that couldn't be present all the time. I always get along well with the little ones. But what makes me want this job is the love I feel for caring for and educating them, treating each one of them as if they were my own family." Hector leaned slightly in his chair, pondering. It was clear that she had something special. "I understand. And the salary we offer, $3,000 a month. Do you think that is enough for your needs?" he asked, trying to be direct. Lorena's eyes shone for a moment. A mixture of surprise and gratitude was clear in her expression. She nodded almost immediately before answering with a slight tremor in her voice. "That would be more than enough, Mr. Hector. It would help a lot to pay for my mother's treatment in the hospital. She suffers from a chronic illness and needs constant care. This job would be a blessing for our family." Hector felt something in his heart clench. Lorena's story touched him deeply. He could see that this woman was fighting for her family, just like him. The kindness in her voice and the sincerity in her look made him decide at that very moment. "I need someone I can completely trust," Hector began, softening the tone of his voice. "My daughters are everything to me, and I can't let just anyone take care of them. But seeing your humility, your story, and how you talk about your family, I feel like I can trust you." Lorena's eyes filled with hope. "Mr. Hector, I promise that I will take care of them as if they were my own." "I don't know how to thank you for the opportunity," Hector smiled, something he hadn't done in a long time. "So, it's decided. You start tomorrow morning." Lorena could hardly believe what she was hearing. Her eyes sparkled with happiness. "Thank you very much, Mr. Hector. I won't disappoint you." That night, after concluding the hiring of Lorena, Hector was preparing to talk to his daughters. He knew that the decision to bring a nanny would be a big step not only for him, but especially for Daniela and Gabriela. The girls, 6 and 8 years old, were full of energy, always running around the house and filling the halls with laughter. But since the death of their mother, he knew they missed a female presence. Hector entered the living room, where the two girls were sitting on the floor playing with their dolls. Daniela, the youngest, had her long brown hair loose, while Gabriela, the oldest, was trying to braid her doll with the same concentration that Hector used to see in his more serious business moments. He sat on the couch next to them, watching them for a few seconds before speaking. "Girls," Hector began, calling the attention of the two, who immediately looked up at him, curious. Gabriela, always the most talkative, was the first to ask, "What is it, Daddy? Is it something good?" Hector smiled slightly, admiring his daughter's curiosity. He then nodded, trying to keep his voice calm, but at the same time convey the seriousness of the conversation. "Starting tomorrow, a very special person is going to help take care of you two in the morning and the afternoon. Her name is Aunt Lorena." The girls exchanged excited glances. Daniela, with her big bright eyes, was the first to speak. "We're going to have a new nanny, Dad?" Hector nodded. "Yes, dear. You know that Daddy needs to take care of the company and can't be with you all the time as I would like. Aunt Lorena will be here to help you while I'm away." Gabriela, who always wanted to understand everything in the smallest details, tilted her head and asked, "Is she kind?" Hector smiled, thinking about how Lorena had acted during the interview. He knew that the new nanny had something special. "Yes, very kind. She is very gentle and has a big heart. I chose Aunt Lorena because I think you will like her a lot." The two girls began to laugh and talk to each other, clearly excited about the idea of meeting Lorena. They missed their mother every day, and Hector knew that this new female presence would bring some comfort, even if it couldn't replace maternal love. Maybe it was what the girls needed at that moment. "And remember, girls," said Hector, leaning a little closer to his daughters, "anything you need, any questions or problems, you can always tell me. Don't be afraid. Daddy will always be here for you, okay?" Daniela approached and hugged her father first, with Gabriela right behind. "We know that, Dad," said Gabriela in a soft voice. "We love you very much." Hector smiled, feeling the warmth of his daughter's hug, and realized that despite all the pain he had lived through, he still had his two precious ones by his side. That was what mattered most. Lorena's arrival at Hector's mansion brought a new energy to the house the next morning. Very early, she was already there, greeting Hector with a welcoming smile and full of willingness to meet Daniela and Gabriela. The curious and eager girls ran down the stairs, finding Lorena in the living room. "Hello, girls," said Lorena with a warm smile, bending down to be at their height. "I am Aunt Lorena, and we are going to spend a lot of time together." At first, Daniela and Gabriela felt shy, like any child in front of a new figure, but a few hours were enough for the ice to break. Lorena had a natural way of connecting with the children. She brought the girls a new glow that they had not felt since the loss of their mother. From day one, Lorena began to play with them, using her imagination to create stories and adventures within the house. Daniela, who loved to draw, began to show her drawings to Lorena, who always praised and encouraged her. As the weeks went by, Lorena became more than just a babysitter for the girls. She dedicated herself to every detail of their routines. In the morning, She woke them up lovingly, always with a smile and a kind word. Then, she would help them with breakfast, making sure they ate well before going to school. When the girls came home from school in the afternoon, Lorena would wait for them at the door, ready to listen to them about their day, their stories, and any problems they had faced. Always very patient, she listened attentively, showing that she cared about every detail. More than that, she made sure to help with homework. She would sit next to Gabriella, who sometimes had difficulties with math, and she would explain each problem calmly until the girl understood. "You are the best teacher, Aunt Lorena," said Gabriella, smiling after finally understanding a difficult exercise. Meanwhile, Daniela, with her vibrant energy, loved to play in the garden. Lorena always accompanied her, inventing games and running next to her. Despite being the youngest, Daniela, who always seemed to have a greater need for attention, found Lorena a true friend. On a sunny day, while they were running through the garden, Daniela suddenly stopped and said, "Aunt Lorena, you look like an angel." Lorena laughed, surprised by the innocent comparison. "An angel? Why?" "Because you make us happy again," Daniela responded with the simplicity that only a child can have. That comment touched Lorena deeply, and she realized that although she could not replace the girl's mother, she was beginning to fill the void that the mother's absence had left. The nights also became special moments. Before sleeping, Lorena sat with the girls to read stories, something they used to do with their mother. Now, that task was Lorena's, and the girls anxiously awaited that moment. The reading ritual became a highlight of the day, creating an even stronger bond between them. "Aunt Lorena, can you read another story today?" Daniela asked, her eyes full of expectation. "Sure, dear, but just one more. If not, tomorrow you'll get very tired at school," Lorena replied with a smile, knowing that those small concessions brought immense happiness to the girls. With time, there was no doubt that Lorena had become much more than just a babysitter. She was a friend, a confidant, someone whom Daniela and Gabriella trusted completely. When they had nightmares at night, it was Lorena's arms they sought. When they were happy or sad, it was with her that they shared their feelings. Hector, for his part, observed from afar the growth of the bond between Lorena and his daughters. He saw how the girls laughed more, how the days became lighter and full of joy. For Hector, who still carried the weight of the loss of his wife, it was a relief to see that Lorena was filling a space that he could never fill alone. However, he knew that there was still a long way to go. Lorena's presence was a gift, but Hector was also aware that she represented a profound change in the family dynamics. For now, he allowed himself to just observe, grateful to have found someone like her. While the days passed, Hector could not help but observe from afar the new dynamic that was forming inside his house. Sitting in his office with a view of the garden, he often found himself admiring the scenes unfolding before him. Daniela and Gabriella ran and played with Lorena, their laughter echoing through the house and bringing a lightness that had been absent since the tragedy. He felt a wave of gratitude as he realized how his daughters had become happier. The shadows that had previously darkened their faces were dissipating, and Lorena's vibrant energy seemed to be brightening their hearts. But along with that gratitude came a growing curiosity about the woman who was making such a difference in the lives of his daughters. Hector wondered who Lorena was. This humble woman, who had once been just a stranger, had now become a fundamental part of the family's life. He watched her as she bent down to help Daniela pick up a toy that had fallen, or as she encouraged Gabriella to continue studying, even when the girl seemed frustrated. There was something special about the way she dealt with children, a naturalness that Hector could not ignore. He often found himself thinking, who is this woman who managed to transform the lives of my daughters in such a short time? The way Lorena interacted with the girls seemed familiar, almost as if he had already seen that kindness and patience somewhere else. But where? He tried hard to remember, but the memory did not come. He began to ask himself questions, reflecting on what else could be behind Lorena's story. What had led her to apply for this job? What was her life like before she got here? These questions generated a concern in his heart, and Hector realized that, as much as he was grateful, he also wanted to know more about the woman who was becoming essential in the lives of his daughters. A mixture of feelings began to emerge. Gratitude for the happiness of his daughters and curiosity about Lorena led him to want to get closer to her, but he doubted. It was difficult for him to open his heart again, even while recovering from the pain of losing his wife. But at the same time, he knew that he needed to better understand this new dynamic, not only because of his curiosity, but also to ensure that his daughters were safe and happy. Hector decided that in the coming days, he would try to learn more about Lorena's life, trying to discover more about the woman who had brought back the sparkle to his daughter's eyes. In the days that followed Lorena's arrival, Hector continued to observe the new dynamic in his house. He always returned home near night, tired after a long day of work. However, when entering the mansion, he was always greeted by a strange silence. The laughter and vibrant sounds that once echoed through the halls seemed to have disappeared. He remembered how his daughters used to run toward him, full of energy, eager to share their adventures of the day. But now, whenever he entered, he found the house silent. The girls were already asleep with their serene and calm faces, and that left him restless. It seemed strange to him that, even after a day of games with Lorena, they were so tired. It was as if the joy they used to have in seeing him had dissipated. Even more intriguing, Lorena seemed to be in a different place in the house every time he arrived. Sometimes she was in the kitchen, other times in the living room, as if she was exploring the mansion and becoming familiar with every corner. This new routine began to create a feeling of trust in Hector. He wondered what happened during the day while he was away. For a woman who seemed so dedicated, why was Lorena never close when he arrived? What else could she be doing that he didn't know about? On one of her days off, Lorena wasn't home, and Hector saw an opportunity to talk to his daughters. He found them in the living room, playing one of the games that Lorena had brought. The girls were excited, but Hector knew he needed to know more about what their relationship was like with the new nanny. "What do you think about Aunt Lorena?" asked Hector, trying to sound casual. Gabriella, the oldest, was the first to answer, her voice full of enthusiasm. "She is very funny, Dad. We play a lot." Daniela, with her bright eyes, intervened. "And she makes delicious juice. But when night comes, we get very sleepy after drinking it." Hector frowned. This detail intrigued him. He had already noticed that the girls were always asleep when he got home, and now the juice seemed to be a common factor. "Does the juice make you sleepy?" he asked, trying to hide the worry in his voice. The girls nodded. "Yes, and after drinking it, we can't stay awake," said Gabriella, laughing a little, as if she thought it was funny. "Sometimes Aunt Lorena talks on the phone with someone, but we don't know who," Daniela added, her innocent tone contrasting with the worrying nature of the revelation. "She always says she's searching but hasn't found it yet." Daniela's words fell like a weight on Hector's chest. Something wasn't right. The connection Lorena had with the girls was undeniable, but what was she doing during the day? And who was that person she was talking to? This growing distrust began to take shape in his mind. Determined to ensure the safety of his daughters, Hector made a drastic decision. Taking advantage of the fact that Lorena was on vacation, he hired a team to install security cameras in some rooms of the house, except the bathrooms, of course. He knew it was an extreme measure, but his concern for the well-being of his daughters spoke louder. As the cameras were installed, Hector could not shake the feeling that something was about to change in their lives. He sat in his office chair, in a whirlwind of thoughts, waiting for the answers he sought to emerge in the images that would be captured. The stillness of the house seemed denser now, and Hector felt he was about to discover something that could change everything. The expectation and fear mixed in his chest, leaving him anxious to understand Lorena's true nature and the mysteries surrounding her life. The next day, Hector woke up determined to discover the truth about Lorena and her relationship with the girls. With a heart heavy with worry, he prepared for work, but his mind was distant, anxious. Before leaving, he checked the cameras that had been installed in the house, all camouflaged in the walls and strategic corners, ensuring that their presence remained unknown to Lorena. He had connected all the images to his cell phone so that he could follow the routine of the nanny and his daughters during the day. As soon as he arrived at the company, Hector locked himself in his office and began to watch the transmissions. The images showed the house in real time. At first, he saw Daniela and Gabriella waking up, excited for another day with Aunt Lorena. They ran to the kitchen, where Lorena was already preparing breakfast. Hector felt a momentary relief, seeing that the girls were happy and well cared for. As the day progressed, he noticed that Lorena did not only stay in the common areas of the house. She walked from one side to the other, entering various rooms, as if she was looking for something. At some moments, Hector saw when the girls approached her, and Lorena quickly realized. She tried to cover up by changing her focus and diverting the girls' attention. He wondered what could be so interesting in other rooms that made her act like that. Lorena's behavior began to arouse concern in Hector. Why was she moving so cautiously? What exactly was she doing while the girls played? She was aware that as a babysitter, she should be involved with the girls. But her actions seemed to indicate something deeper, more secret. At the end of the afternoon, Hector watched tensely as Lorena began to prepare the natural passion fruit juice. The familiar smell of the fruit invaded the screen of his cell phone and brought back warm memories of his wife, who used to make this same juice for the girls before she passed away. A part of Hector was happy to see this continuity, but his joy was quickly replaced by uneasiness when he noticed that Lorena had taken a small envelope out of her pocket while preparing the juice. Staring at the screen, Hector watched as Lorena opened the envelope and poured some into one of the glasses before mixing it. His heart raced. What was that? His mind began to work 1,000 miles an hour. She must be adding something to the juice. A feeling of dread began to take hold of him. The girls didn't know anything, but Hector was overcome by an uncontrollable urge to understand what was happening. He continued to watch, unable to look away from the screen, anxious to discover what else could be happening. Daniela and Gabriella's smiles were now a source of anguish, and he wondered if he should confront Lorena or wait a little longer to understand the situation. The questions hurt his mind. Why was she behaving like this? What was she looking for? And what was in that envelope that she added to the juice? Driven by the growing uneasiness, Hector decided that he needed to act. Whatever was happening with Lorena and his daughters, he couldn't continue like this. Normally, he got home at 6 in the afternoon, but that Thursday, he decided to leave the company early at 5 without telling Lorena. He drove his car through the familiar streets, his heart racing with every kilometer that brought him closer to home. When he arrived at the mansion, Hector parked the car in a place a little far from the main entrance, a little trick he had learned over the years to avoid the employees seeing him when he arrived. He wanted to make sure that his return was discreet. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to enter the house quietly. As he crossed the garden carefully, each step seemed to echo in his mind. He moved cautiously, attentive to every sound around him. The front door opened with a soft creak, but Hector managed to enter without making a sound. The silence of the house immediately enveloped him, and he realized that, unlike the laughter of before, there was an atmosphere of expectation in the air. Hector planned to discreetly observe Lorena's routine, paying attention to any indication of what she might be doing in his absence. He knew that she often entered the bathroom, especially when she was talking on the phone, and the lack of cameras in those spaces made him even more curious and worried. Moving like a shadow through the house, Hector avoided the noise of the floorboards and slowly headed toward the corridor that led to the bathroom. He wanted to know what was happening, what Lorena was saying while hiding there. Every moment seemed to drag on, and Hector, with his heart racing, prepared himself to listen to anything that could clarify his suspicions. He stopped in front of the bathroom door, listening attentively, his heightened senses alert. What would be happening on the other side of that door? The silence was interrupted only by the sound of low voices, Lorena's voice, accompanied by a serious tone that Hector did not recognize. He leaned a little closer to the door, the tension accumulating in his body. Now he was about to discover what was hidden, and the expectation paralyzed him for a moment, but he knew he had to be cautious. As the conversation continued, Hector prepared himself. Hector walked into the room, investigating, even more determined to get to the bottom of the truth. He approached the door, his heart racing, the expectation boiling inside him. With his ear pressed against the cold wood, he picked up the voices developing on the other side. Lorena's voice, normally sweet and calm, sounded tense, almost impatient. "Did you give the girls that medicine to make them sleep?" the deep voice of a man asked. "Yes, just as we planned," Lorena replied. But there was a note of frustration in her voice. "However, I still haven't found where the safe is." Hector felt his stomach turn when he heard that. What was that safe? He took a step back, a mix of disbelief and panic taking over his mind. Thinking quickly, he took out his cell phone and began to record the audio, fearing he might lose any detail of the conversation. Lorena continued, her tone becoming even more incisive. This is taking longer than necessary. I have been doing this for days, and I still have not found anything. Besides, it's taken me days to study everything Hector's ex-wife did so that he and his daughters would like and trust me. I'm trying to do everything his ex-wife did, but I'm getting tired of this. We need to find that safe soon and get out of here, or we'll have to do something more extreme. Lorena's words cut through the air like a sharp blade, and Hector noticed a drastic change in her tone of voice. She was no longer the caring caregiver he knew. She sounded authentic in her words, and the frustration emanating from her voice was palpable. There was a strength and a determination that left him restless. Hector, with his mind bubbling with questions and a growing weight on his heart, prepared to act. But all he could do for now was listen and record. Amid the confusion of emotions and thoughts, Hector decided to let Lorena continue her conversation on the phone. He walked away from the door, not wanting to be discovered, and quickly went to the girls' room. The image of Daniela and Gabriella sleeping peacefully tightened his grip. They were the ones he wanted to protect the most. When entering the room, he made sure the door was tightly closed, creating a barrier between them and the threat he now perceived inside his house. With his heart racing, he took the cell phone and immediately dialed the police number. The operator's voice sounded in the background, but Hector could barely hear the questions. There is a woman inside my house. She is trying to rob me. Please come quickly. The urgency in his voice reflected the desperation that took over his mind. After giving his address, he hung up and looked at his daughters, still asleep, not knowing the danger they were in. In a matter of minutes, the sound of sirens broke the calm of the night. Hector listened to the commotion outside, and his mind filled with hope that the police would arrive on time. He positioned himself near the door anxiously. While the police team forced their way in, he felt relieved hearing the officers' shouts of orders and the sound of quick footsteps through the house. "We are here, stay where you are," ordered one of the policemen, and Hector quickly left the room, motioning for them to follow him. When they entered the kitchen, they found Lorena standing, but her expression was no longer the same. The calm tone he knew had disappeared, giving way to a ferocity that surprised him. Hector, still stunned, intervened. "I heard the entire conversation between you and that man. I recorded everything, you idiot." "This is your family's fault," Lorena shouted, rage pulsating in her words. "I am the daughter of one of your father's former employees, and I am also his daughter. Your father never wanted to take the DNA test because he didn't want to alarm the company. Part of that money belongs to me." The revelation left Hector in shock, a feeling of disbelief and sadness mixing within him. "Lorena, you didn't need to do this. We could have talked. I would have resolved everything fairly," he replied, his voice cracking. He felt the trust he had placed in her crumble in fractions of a second. "You acted. You tried to be my ex-wife. That's what seemed familiar about you." Police officers, already aware of the situation, began to gather evidence, including the recordings that Hector had made. He remembered the scene in which Lorena prepared the passion fruit juice, adding that mysterious little bag that had aroused his suspicions. Now he understood the seriousness of the situation and how close his daughters had been to danger. While Lorena was handcuffed and taken out of the house, Hector turned to the room where Daniela and Gabriella were still sleeping. He gently woke them up, hugging them tightly. The girls opened their eyes, sleepy, but soon their faces lit up at the sight of their father. "Hi, Dad," murmured Gabriella, as Daniela snuggled closer to him. "I promise I will never leave you again or delegate the duty of caring for you to anyone else," said Hector, emotion overflowing in his voice. He hugged them tightly, feeling the beat of their hearts together, and knew that regardless of the difficulties, he would always fight to protect them. That night, under the soft light of the lamp, Hector decided that his family was the only thing that mattered and would do anything to keep them safe. After Lorena's arrest, Hector was involved in a series of events that would change his perspective on life and family. A few days later, he decided to go to the police station to find out about the situation. Upon arrival, he was greeted by one of the police officers who had participated in Lorena's arrest. She had a sick mother, the police officer began, looking at Hector with an expression of age. Her mother is hospitalized in a city hospital, and the records confirm that Lorena was trying to raise money to cover the treatment. Hector felt a mixture of compassion and sadness. He remembered the sparkle in Lorena's eyes when she talked about the importance of taking care of her daughters, and now he understood that behind her actions there was a much deeper story. "I know you're upset, but what she wanted was not just your money," the policeman continued. "She was desperate to help her mother." Those words resonated in Hector's mind. He decided that somehow he wanted to help. "I want to cover all the costs of Lorena's mother's treatment," he said, determined. He had the impression that if his father had done that, he would not be so sorry on his deathbed. It was an opportunity to redeem his family's name, now that he was responsible. With that intention in mind, Hector went to the hospital where Lorena's mother was hospitalized. When he entered the room, he saw a fragile woman, visibly weakened but with a light of hope in her eyes. "You must be Hector," she said, recognizing him. "Lorena told me a lot about you." "Yes, it is me. I came to help," answered Hector, explaining his decision to pay all the costs of the treatment and also the overdue amounts. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me and Lorena," she said, excitedly. "I regret what my daughter did. I shouldn't have acted like that. I just wanted her to have a better life, away from poverty." The woman then shared a revelation that Hector could never have imagined. "Lorena is not your father's daughter. In reality, I raised her alone, and when she was a child, I made her believe that her father was a rich man. I wanted her to feel special and think that she had a promising future. I wanted her to think that her father was someone important, not a miserable man like her own father was." Hector felt a mix of relief and sadness. The truth about Lorena was a weight lifted from his shoulders, but he also realized how much this farce had affected his life. "It's okay. I forgive you now, Lorena. The truth is that this made me understand that her family needs love and support just like mine," he said, feeling that compassion was the way forward. Days went by, and the police continued the investigation. They discovered that the man Lorena was talking to on the phone was her accomplice, someone who manipulated her to carry out the plan. He was found, arrested, and sentenced. Hector knew that he only used Lorena to steal his money and flee, and that left him even more relieved for having acted quickly. While the situation was resolved, Hector focused on spending more time with his daughters, Daniela and Gabriela. He decided that he wanted to create memories, moments of happiness that would fill the void left by their mother. Through this process, he learned the importance of forgiveness and family. Finally, Lorena received a light sentence, and Hector decided to visit her in jail. When he saw her, he noticed that there was a change in her expression. She seemed calmer, but there was still a weight of regret on her shoulders. "Lorena, I want you to know that I love you." "I forgave you," Hector said, looking into her eyes. "I understand that you were fighting for your mother, and in a way, that doesn't justify your actions. But now I know that it wasn't just malice. Remember, your true family is the one you create and love. And please, take care of your mother." With this, Hector said goodbye to Lorena, taking with him the certainty that forgiveness is a powerful act, a step towards peace. He left the prison determined to move forward, keeping the safety of his daughters as his priority, but now wiser about human nature and the complexity of relationships. Life went on, and Hector was ready to embrace each new day with his girls by his side, always vigilant but with a lighter heart. A year had passed since Hector faced the challenges and revelations about Lorena. Time brought him a new sense of hope and renewal, and he dedicated himself to creating a loving environment for his daughters, Daniela and Gabriela. The days became happier and full of life, but Hector felt that something was still missing. On a sunny morning, while taking the girls to school, Hector noticed a woman in front of him. She was bent over, helping her son tie his shoelaces. Hector walked over, and as he looked at her, he noticed a glint of kindness in her eyes. "Hello," she said, smiling. "It seems like we are all on the same mission, taking our little ones to school." "Definitely," Hector replied, standing up and adjusting his posture. "My name is Clara, and this is Miguel," she said. "And you?" "Hector. Nice to meet you," he said, extending his hand. "These are my daughters, Daniela and Gabriela." The girls, always full of energy, soon became involved in the conversation, and Hector felt relieved to realize that Clara had a natural way of relating to them. Clara asked questions about what they liked to do, and quickly the girls felt comfortable. As the weeks went by, Hector and Clara began to meet more often. They discovered that they both shared the pain of loss since Clara had also been widowed. The conversations about their pasts turned into laughter and plans for the future. They both understood the difficulties of raising children alone, and more importantly, they knew the value of supporting each other. "It's amazing how our lives intersected," Hector told Clara on one of their outings as they walked through the park. "I feel like I can finally see a brighter future." Clara smiled, touching him gently on the arm. "Me too. Our children get along very well, and that's important. They are creating a bond that can be special." Hector realized that Clara was not only kind and educated, but also a woman who had a genuine love for children. Not only did she take care of her son, but she also seemed to care for Daniela and Gabriela as if they were her own. Over time, the love between Hector and Clara blossomed. They were happy together, and the children became inseparable, playing and having fun as if they had always been one big family. Months later, on a moonlit night, Hector decided it was time to take the next step. He planned a surprise after a special dinner at home. While the children were entertained, Hector turned to Clara with his heart beating strongly. "Clara, you have become an essential part of our lives. I want you to be part of our family permanently," he said, taking a small box from his pocket. Emotion invaded him. "Do you want to marry me?" Clara's eyes shone with tears of happiness. "Yes, Hector, I do." The two hugged each other, surrounded by the warmth and love that now filled not only their hearts but also Hector's house. The proposal was not only a commitment between them, but also the promise of a united future for their families. Over time, Hector and Clara married in a beautiful ceremony, with Daniela and Gabriela at their side, beaming with happiness. The new family began to establish itself, full of love, laughter, and new memories. Hector knew he had found someone special. Clara not only brought joy back to his life, but also became a loving mother to his daughters. Together, they formed a new family, ready to face the future with love and unity, always keeping in their hearts the memory of what united them. Life began again, and Hector felt that he was finally where he should be, surrounded by love, hope, and a new beginning. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share with someone who needs to hear this message. What would you do in Hector's place? Could you also forgive? Comment below. Your opinion is very important to us. And remember, each story has a lesson to teach us. Until next time.